Well, hey everybody, this is Kev Bo Jones here, coming to you celebrating the wonderful world of baseball cards. This is my first YouTube video. It is super lo-fi. I hope as the months and years go by, the production value gets much better. But I wanted to do my first video and show you my original quote-unquote vintage collection that I had when I was about 12 or 13 years old. Some of these cards were bought at shows. Some were in an old shoebox that the neighbor gave me. Others were I picked up just collecting as a kid. So this book I've always hung on to. A few of the cards have gotten pulled out over the years. But I thought I would show you kind of the remnants of my very first binder of vintage cards. So you can kind of see here what we have. We've got some old 58s, 59, 61, 62 tops. I'm just going to kind of scroll through these pages and let you kind of look here. Always enjoyed this Smokey Burgess here. That's one I've always hung on to. My dad got me that one. Fireballer Jim Maloney, Sad Sam Jones. The World Series cards. The neighbor who got me gave me a lot of these vintage cards when I was a kid. Loved these kind of World Series cards. And he always managed to have a lot of them, and I've hung on to a lot of those. Now, a lot of these guys aren't really stars. And as you'll see as the years kind of go on, these were guys that I kind of perceived as stars in the 80s. A lot of them were, at this time, by the time the 80s came around, managers and things like that. And these were basically just the only old vintage cards I had. So you can kind of see, you know, what my collection kind of looked like here. Kind of getting into 67 and 68. You know, Sal Bando, he was a star for the Brewers. There's Walt No Neck Williams, kind of a classic player. Andy Messersmith, I think he was one of the first guys who tested out free agency. Big old Davey May, there's an old Catfish Hunter there. And then, like I said, just kind of looking at these pages, these were all guys that I kind of perceived as stars. There's a pretty old beat-up Bob Gibson that I've always hung on to. Kind of getting into some league leaders, 1970. You'll see the majority of these are 1970 and 1971. These were what was given to me primarily in that old shoebox by my neighbor. Now the Roberto Clementes and Willie Mays and Yaz and a lot of those guys, Killebrew, I pulled a lot of those out over the years as I got older. I'll probably do another video later showing some more of the superstars that came from this lot. I have sold some of them over the years. Here's a funny Frank Howard here. If you look closely, you can kind of see almost that it's signed. Frank Howard did grow up in lived in my hometown, but I do believe that was possibly the neighbor who signed that. So it's just kind of a funny old card there. But you'll see here, there's Rusty Staub. He was popular. Andy Etchebarren was a coach for the Brewers. There's Mazeroski. Just kind of look here and see kind of just a lot of the different 1970 Topps cards. I know that's the Heritage this year, so it's kind of fun. There's more of those World Series cards. Here's getting into 1971 now, a lot of the leaguers. Of course, there's a ton of Hall of Famers here. Johnny Bench, there's Yaz, Tony Perez, Billy Williams, Tom Seaver, Jim Palmer. Kind of getting into some of the more 70s. There's Billy Martin, of course, the famous manager and player. Bobby Grich, I think that's his rookie. So you can kind of see here a lot of these guys were guys that I kind of just perceived to be stars. Jim Cott. Anyway, this was my book from when I was a kid. I've always hung on to it. I've always kind of kept it in this binder. And when we're done, I'll show you kind of what the state of this binder looks like now. Here's just some more of these 71s. There's Hoyt Wilhelm. I guess I really liked Messersmith for some reason. I think that was just a name I recognized. Greg Luzinski, big slugger. Gaylord Perry. I'm not sure who Ron Klimkowski was. Ken Forsch, remember him and his brother Bob. They were big pitchers. There's Beat Up McCovey, Maury Wills. Ray Fosse, I remember him, of course, from the collision with Pete Rose. So you can see these cards are pretty beat up. More of these World Series cards. These cards are pretty beat up, but they retain more sentimental value than anything. It's just kind of giving a look. This is kind of what started my love of vintage cards. We're kind of moving into 72. One of my favorites, Vita Blue there. Raleigh. There's a Dave Kingman. I think that's his rookie. Vince Coleman was my favorite. He made it into the book. Still love Vince Coleman. That kind of shows about when the time that I probably put this book together, 1986. And you'll see a little page dedicated to him in the back. Chris Chambliss, that's a guy I remember getting cards of from PAX. This is kind of interesting here. Some of the in-action cards. So you can see anywhere where there's a space, there was probably a superstar there that got pulled. But a lot of these guys are still in there. Here's another one of those Frank Howards. This one is signed too. I'm not sure if that's actually Frank Howard's signature or if that again was possibly the neighbor. I'm thinking that possibly could have been signed by him, but I'm not sure. Kind of fun to think about though. Kind of moving into 74. You can see it really thins out here kind of as we get into the mid-70s. And then most of these back here are ones that I picked up collecting. There's the famous Dick Tidrow. Here's some of the Reds. Here's an old kind of funny Pete Rose that I picked up as a kid. As you can see, this thing is pretty beat up, but it is one that you can see there's like some kind of, I don't know what's going on in there. Just always beat up, but this is one card that I've always loved. Pretty beat up, but I've always hung on to it. It stays in this binder. Couple more of these World Series cards, and then of course there's my Vince Coleman page there, so you can see Vince in all his glory. Here's the Sport Flicks. These things always were a little crazy, kind of hard to see on the video, but there you go. Vince Coleman, big fan of his. So this is just my first kind of, and then I got the World Series card there, of course. So this is kind of my lo-fi first video. It'll get better. I hope you made it all the way through, but I'll just give you one last kind of peek here. So this is generally kind of the state of this book. No cover. It's dusty. It's just very old, and you know, we love those vintage cards, and this is kind of where it's always started for me and what my passion has been about. So thanks everybody for watching. I'll be back with something else probably in a couple of days, and thanks for watching.